It is huge news that could make the race for president particularly interesting and complicated, particularly here in battleground Michigan. Grand Rapids native and Representative Justin Amash throwing his hat into the ring in his home state, and he could swing thousands of votes in a contest that President Trump won only by 10,000 in 2016. But the big question tonight, from whom does Amash steal those votes? Joe Biden or President Trump?
Political reporter Rick Albin just talked with Amash, an independent who's hoping to run on the Libertarian ticket.
Congressman, tell me how you came to this big decision to run for president of the United States. I mean, it's not like you're unfamiliar with politics, but that is a big step.
It is a big step, and it was a big decision. And I spent a lot of time with family and friends and others talking about this decision. I stopped campaigning for my congressional seat about mid-February and started focusing on this. And we got a little bit of a delay because of the coronavirus situation. We didn't want to rush that, and we wanted to spend time making sure we were taking care of constituents and thinking about how that might also affect the race. But now, over the past couple weeks, I've been able to focus on it. I spent some time really digging into it and decided that I would run because I believe I can win. And that's the most important thing here. I don't want to run with the idea of not winning. If I'm going to run, I'm running to win. And that's what I'm focused on, because I think we need to make a change for the American people. We can't just run for messaging purposes or just for fun. We have to run to win and give people honest, practical choices in the White House.
I appreciate your dedication to doing this, and with due respect, I would point out that the Libertarian ticket has never really been in a position to win. Why do you think you can put it there?
Well, I've been in Congress for more than 9 years. I've learned the system, and I understand what's wrong with it. And I can see how broken it is. And that's something I've talked about a lot over the past year. And it's one of the reasons I became an independent. I saw the partisan death spiral that was happening. And it hasn't been fixed. It hasn't been addressed. And what people are talking about right now, with essentially pushing through either Trump or Biden, two people who I don't think reflect the views of the majority of Americans. And I think that most Americans would prefer an alternative to these candidates. What the parties are doing is the same old, same old. And we need something that's going to be different. We need someone who's going to treat people fairly, who's going to listen to people at home, who's going to do things that are different from the status quo. And what happens time and again when we have presidents is they come in there and they expand executive power, and they further diminish the power of Congress, and Congress readily assists them in this by giving up its power to the president. And we need a president who's going to stand strong, stand firm for the American people, and act with humility toward the whole process, which means our entire constitutional system, and allow people at home to make more decisions, trust the people with the knowledge they have.
One of the things that will be different, could be different this year, are the conventions. I know the Libertarian convention that was going to be in Austin has been postponed maybe until July. So does that kind of change the way this whole campaign will look, because the Democrats are going to delay theirs and we don't even know what those conventions will look like? So does that make this a different kind of race?
Well, the unpredictability makes it a different kind of race. And when you have situations like this where things are a little bit chaotic, it's actually a time when something like a Libertarian Party can rise up and present a real challenge to the Republican and Democratic parties. So I see it as an opportunity here. A lot of people don't know how this is going to turn out in this election cycle, whether we'll be able to go out on the campaign trail or whether we'll all be campaigning from home. And I think that shakes things up a little bit and creates some variability that allows a third-party candidate or some other candidate to get some traction. And like I said, I wouldn't do this if I didn't think I could win, and I feel confident about the chances here.
Okay, let's bring Rick in now live from home tonight. And Rick, boy, a lot to unpack here. Some of what Amash said and talks about is his presence, particularly here in Michigan. And how is that going to change the face of the race now, Rick? Both President Trump and Joe Biden know they have to win here. It's a battleground. What does this do?
Well, I think you said the most important phrase that we'll hear in this race, and that is something to the effect of we don't know who he potentially can take votes from. I mean, there certainly are going to be those folks that were Bernie Sanders supporters that will look at some of what Justin Amash talks about and like it. And there are going to be some disenfranchised Republicans that may look at him as an alternative to President Trump. But we're dealing with such fine margins, 10,000 votes, and that was in a very unusual election cycle. So if he comes into Michigan, particularly using the West Michigan base and his knowledge of the state, and can do better than the Libertarians did just 4 years ago, that could have an impact on a must-win state. Now, what can he do elsewhere? The question is, are there going to be people all over the country that are looking for an alternative from the two mainstream candidates, which we assume at this point will be Donald Trump and Joe Biden? And so when he comes in to do this, if he can win the Libertarian nomination, he will be a different kind of candidate. And I would remind people that Libertarians do not poll particularly well, but in the last election cycle, they had their best cycle ever, and were actually able to get some of the state parties back on the ticket for the first time in a long time. So this is going to be fascinating to watch it play out. I look forward to doing it, and I make no predictions.
All right, Rick. Yeah, as if Michigan needed another wrinkle. We'll look forward to that. All right. Thanks, Rick.